All right, welcome in everybody. Tony Patelis here, the College Hoop News Podcast. I am your host. Tonight we have our first weekly recap edition. The first few episodes of the podcast, we were doing, conference previews, top 25 previews, getting ready for the season. But now we have some games under our belt, so we're going to go into a weekly recap, which we're going to be doing every Sunday night. I'll have a new guest on every week, and should be a lot of fun. Tonight I have Connor Hope with me from Condorian FM. You can check him out on Twitter, and also check out his YouTube page. He's got a lot of great videos up. He's kind of doing the same thing I'm doing right now on the YouTube thing. So, Connor, how are you?
I'm doing well, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. So, all right, let's get right into this tonight. So, looking at the first week or so of the season, Connor, how do you feel about it? Because, to me, it's been somewhat underwhelming. I think it'll pick up, with with all these tournaments coming up this week, like, the Maui and PK80. You've got a lot of good ones coming up here. What's your overall take on the first week of the season?
Yeah, Tony, I think that the underwhelming portion of it came a lot due to the fact that the big marquee matchups towards the beginning were underwhelming. I think we kind of got what we expected from some of these D1 versus D2, matchups. We kind of got what we were expecting a little bit from the mid-major, high-major matchups. And those tended, some of those tended to be pretty good. It was like the Georgia Tech UCLA matchup that was underwhelming, or the fact that Texas A&M, West Virginia wasn't the battle we thought it was going to be, stuff like that. I've been pretty underwhelmed, and especially compared to past seasons, the opening week has been pretty slow, pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, I had a lot of really interesting high major, mid major games pegged, and I thought we might see a few upsets, but it just didn't come to fruition. The mid majors just didn't come through, and it kind of made it a little bit disappointing. But looking at a few teams, who are maybe some teams you're impressed with early this season?
Right now, I've been very impressed with Arizona State. And I'm not afraid to admit that I might be wrong. I might be wrong about this front court. Romello White and Daquan Lake look excellent in their first 4 games. They played very well against the San Diego State team that I think a lot of people had pegged towards the top of the Mountain West. They have 4 players that are averaging over 18 points a game. So I've been very impressed with Arizona State. As far as top 25 teams I'm impressed with, Xavier and Purdue have looked excellent. Yep. Other than, their road matchups, Purdue against Marquette and Xavier against Wisconsin, both teams are averaging over 100 points a game against the lower tier matchups that they've had. So they've both looked pretty good. And, other than that, top of the Mountain West looks pretty good. Boise State, Wyoming, Nevada, UNLV all had pretty solid opening weeks. Toledo, with wins over St. Joseph's and Oakland, looked pretty decent. UT Arlington, looks like they have a pretty solid team. And then, Belmont looks pretty good. They beat Seattle. They beat Middle Tennessee on the road, Vandy, and they had a tough loss at UW at Washington. So, there's been some teams that have impressed me quite a bit to open up the season.
Absolutely. One of those teams that I wanted to mention in the Mountain West is Nevada. The Martin twins have played really well. Jordan Caroline has been great. They have some nice wins. Idaho's a really good mid-major team. Santa Clara is a team that I really like in the WCC. They beat them on the road. I think you were at that game.
I was at that game.
Rhode Island. Yeah, and Rhode Island's a really good win. So I think this is a possible, top 25 team in a few weeks if they can rack up some more wins. What do you think about the Wolfpack?
Yeah, I mean, from what I saw live, they'll be in the top 25. They deserve to be in the top 25. They have depth. They have length in their backcourt, and from what I saw, it looked, sometimes you got the sense that there were more than 5 players on the court for Nevada. They just were overwhelming on defense in terms of getting, on-ball defense and preventing other players from getting open off screens. And it seemed like they always had somebody open on offense. So this Nevada team is very talented. Musselman's put together a very, very good squad.
Yeah, we've talked about it. The Martin twins just bring so much to this roster. on both ends of the floor. They can come, they can guard, 1 through 4, just really, really versatile. And I think they bring a lot to the roster, like I said. And this is a legit, dangerous team, and especially come March, I think. They have a long way to go. But the thing that kind of worries me is their non-conference schedule isn't that great. So they might still have to win the Mountain West tournament. I mean, that game with TCU is going to be really big. They already got the game with URI, which is good, and that Texas Tech matchup them too. So they might have to win both those games to get into the NCAA tournament as an at-large. What do you think about that?
Yeah, they're gonna have to win some games to get in as an at-large. They're gonna have to probably win one of those games, if not both of those games, and then they could possibly get in with 2 losses in the Mountain West regular season, but they're gonna have to pretty much clean up the regular season title to get an at-large bid. But yeah, like you said, the Martin twins looked excellent. They can play, pretty much 2 through 4 if they're needed. They're just long. I think I mentioned during parts of the game they put the Martin twins on Matt Hauser and KJ Fagan, which isn't a good matchup for Santa Clara. I mean, you've got that length against 6-footers. So so I mean, this Nevada team, it has the talent going for it. It's just whether or not it can win the big games that it needs to win to get in as an at-large.
Absolutely. The other team I wanted to mention is Maryland. Maryland's 4-0. They have a win over Bucknell last night. That was pretty impressive. They had to come back, but they got it done in the second half. They also beat a pretty good Butler team a few days ago. And, they have that really good trio of Anthony Cowan, Justin Jackson, and Kevin Herter. But their newcomers have really impressed me. Bruno Fernando had 14 and 8 last night. Darryl Morcell is a kid who's averaging 11 points a game. I'm not sure if you caught any of that game last night, but Maryland looks really good out of the gate here.
Yeah, no, Maryland looks really good, and it looks like they'll be able to compete, not necessarily at the top, but towards the top of that Big Ten conference. And yeah, they've been impressive, and I think a lot of people might have been underrating them a little bit going into the season. I know a lot of people had them pegged as a bubble team that could possibly miss. I think they're better than that. I thought they were better than that coming in. So yeah, but they definitely, Bucknell's not an easy win. Butler's not an easy win. So they've been pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, my concern with them coming into this season was, do they have enough? Will they get enough production around those top 3 guys that I mentioned? And if Fernando and Morcell are going to do what they've been doing, then they'll be fine, and they could probably maybe creep up into that top 5 in the Big Ten. Right now, I probably put them in that 5th or 6th spot. But if they keep, getting better, especially their young players, then definitely this is definitely a tournament team in my eyes.
Yeah, no, they're right now they're definitely for me in that 5 or 6 spot. But there's a team or two in that 1 to 4 spot that I haven't been as impressed with. So we'll see how that goes. They could possibly take that 4 spot.
Anthony Cowan, people were a little concerned about the point guard spot. Obviously, Melo Trimble is gone, but Anthony Cowan's averaging 18 points, 7 rebounds, and almost 4 assists a game out of the gate here. So he's been tremendous. So I think Maryland will be fine if he's going to put up those type of numbers. So Maryland is definitely a team I want to be keeping my eye on heading into conference play here. All right, so moving on here, let's talk about something else. So obviously, this Michael Porter Jr. injury. Now, I'm not starting any conspiracy theories or anything like that, but it's a little concerning to me. They've been very, very hush-hush on the situation. They haven't given us a lot of information. He started that game against Iowa State a few days ago, and he played like 2 minutes, and they pulled him, and then you haven't seen him since. Are you a little concerned about this, or you just think it's maybe just a small injury and we don't have to worry about it?
I'm very concerned about this. Normally, when a team doesn't outright say what the timetable is on return, it's worse than they thought it was initially.
Absolutely.
And I was already skeptical of Missouri and the hype surrounding them. I think that I'm not a huge fan of Quantum Martin as a coach, so I think people were riding them a little bit too hard because of Michael Porter Jr. and the fact that his injury could keep him out for any length of time. I mean, you saw what Utah did to them the other day. So without him, they're a team that kind of, for me, could drop pretty far down in the SEC, considering how strong and deep this SEC conference is.
So let's say that he is seriously injured and he misses maybe the season or at least a handful of months. What do you see with this Missouri team? Do you think they're still an NCAA tournament team without him? Obviously not a high seed, but do you think they're maybe like a 10 seed, a 9 seed? What do you think about Missouri?
I think they're pretty good. I don't know if they're necessarily an NCAA tournament team without him, though. I think that a lot of their seeding potential rode on the fact that he was one of the top recruits coming out of high school. So, yeah.
Yeah, like I think they're so hush hush on the situation, so that just kind of concerns me. If it was something small, I think they'd come out and say it. Oh, he has a strained, something, and he'll be out maybe a week or so, and he'll be back. But they just really haven't been giving us any information on it. So definitely, it's a little concerning, and definitely that would definitely shake up the SEC if Michael Porter Jr. misses a considerable amount of time. So, all right, so moving on here, UCLA, we got this crazy situation. Cody Riley, LeAngelo Ball, and the third player there. They get out of China. President Trump apparently helped out in that situation. What do you think about their punishment? The whole suspended indefinitely thing is kind of like a code for, well, we don't know yet, so we'll just say indefinitely for now. What do you think would be a proper punishment for these three players, and how long do you think they'll get suspended for, in your opinion?
So last I heard, the UCLA athletic department said that it indefinitely meant either half the season or the full season. They hadn't made the decision yet. I've also heard rumblings about the fact that a lot of UCLA season ticket holders for both basketball and football are going to withhold their booster money. They're not going to buy season tickets if UCLA decides that they're going to, reinstitute these players prior to the end of the season. So for UCLA, it really comes down to whether they want these players so that they can win the Pac-12 or whether they want the money from the boosters. My gut feeling is it's probably going to be half the season, but once an athletic program, because it's not just basketball right now, it's basketball and football. Once an athletic program starts losing money, it kind of puts pressure on the athletic department to make a bigger example of the athletes. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think half the season is fine. I would have been very upset if you saw 3 to 5 games or something like that. I think a full season is a little too harsh, even for me, who's somebody who's pretty strict when it comes to stupid decisions like this and punishment. But I think maybe until conference play or something like that, I would be fine with that. But again, if you're getting pressure from your boosters and your season ticket holders, that puts a lot, like you said, puts a lot of pressure on the program. So I'm probably going to say half the season, but it's just the height of stupidity. I mean, it's not like you're stealing, in the States. I mean, China is a serious country where, you can go to jail for, I think it was like 3 to 10 years. So, I mean, I just don't understand. I don't buy well, they're just kids. I knew I shouldn't have been stealing at age 5. I mean, these kids are 18 years old.
And remember, this wasn't just a basketball game, right? If this was just them going to play, it would have been one thing, right? But this was a goodwill tour where Georgia Tech and UCLA were kind of representing not only their basketball programs but their schools in China, and that's why a lot of the boosters. I mean, yeah, they care about the athletic program, but they care more about the fact that it represents the school poorly, and so that's why I kind of initially said a full season. It had nothing to do with the fact that they were there for basketball. It had everything to do with the fact that they were there representing their, academic institution and decided to commit a crime that even some places in the States would be a low-level felony. So, they weren't stealing candy from a convenience store. They were stealing, a couple $100 pair of sunglasses. So, I mean,
I hope they know how lucky they are.
Yeah.
Because they could have been in serious trouble, talking about ruin your life trouble. So I hope they are appreciative, that they're home and, they didn't get in serious trouble. Because, again, like I said, that's something that could possibly ruin their careers. So, we'll see what happens. Again, I think half the season's fine. But, just a really bad decision by those three guys. So,
yeah.
All right, so moving on here. So I wanted to talk.
Oh, I was just going to say it was probably lucky that LiAngelo Ball was with them, because if he wasn't with them, then it probably wouldn't have gotten the same media attention. So as much as I can't stand the people hating on the Balls or the Ball children just because of their father, I mean, it was probably a good thing that he was there.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, so let's talk about another issue. If you haven't heard, Albany has their head coach and an assistant coach suspended for a game for an NCAA infraction. The assistant coach apparently set up a signing ceremony for one of their recruits and gave him some apparel from the school. And just for that, the coaches will be suspended for a game. How do you feel about this situation? Is this just another ridiculous infraction sent out by the NCAA, in your opinion?
I get it. I get where the NCAA is coming from. They don't want any semblance of paying off players for signing with them. But I mean, I think you've got to be practical. No player is going to sign with University of Albany because they get a really cool T-shirt. Like, the T-shirts are cool, but they know that no matter where they sign, they're going to get apparel when they're there. So that's not really like the same as $100,000 to a player, right? So I get where they're coming from. They want to have a strict hand, especially with everything that went on preseason with the FBI and coaches paying players. They kind of are trying to make an example of everything they can now. But I think it's a little bit of a coming down too heavy-handed because of your past mistakes.
Yeah, I just think that, they're so worried about these little things like, the apparel and, Rob Gray playing in a church league game. And then you have assistant coaches and programs paying players $100,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars right under their nose. And this is what they're worried about. They should maybe put this stuff to the side, stupid little things like this, and maybe focus in on, the serious things that are going on, like the FBI investigation and whatnot. It just makes them look bad, in my opinion. I mean, I can't take them seriously right now. I really can't. I feel like they're almost incompetent. Time and time again, you hear these stories and it just gets more laughable by the day. The NCAA, I feel like, just like in boxing, they need a sanctioning body. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely do. And I agree with you. They don't know what to punish and how to punish it.
Right.
And they don't know what to. I mean, the Rob Gray situation, what I thought was probably the most ridiculous one, and that included the Braxton Beverly situation at NC State. I mean, they just, taking a summer school course will get you suspended, but like they refuse to acknowledge the fact that their top programs are paying others. Like, it's all about the money for them, and it's obvious that it's all about the money for them. Or it's become that facade has become the norm. So
these programs make so much money for that organization that they're not going to be motivated to punish them the way they should be. The punishment never fits the crime. A lot of these situations, even programs do it. You hear of a kid doing something really bad, like stealing or breaking into a house, and you think, okay, he's going to be suspended for the season, or then you look and he's like, oh, he's out for 3 games and he'll be back. They need another sanctioning. They need a sanctioning body to come in and really, dole out proper punishment, because if they just continue to do what they're doing, they're just going to become a laughing stock, and they're already a laughing stock. It's just a little sad to me, and it's frustrating because it's the sport that myself and you really love, and it's just not run the right way.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this a couple weeks before the season. I think they should bring in a third party governing board, like a board that can review cases like this, do internal investigations of cases like this. You got obviously they're not going to have subpoena power and stuff that the FBI had, but you know, they're not going to be as worried, I guess, about what the bottom line is, as a board that's run by high major representatives in the NCAA.
Right. They
So
did put some type of committee together once all the FBI infractions started, and Mark Emmert is on that committee.
yeah.
So you're putting the head of the organization who can't do their job into the committee that is investigating them because they can't do their job. It makes no sense. Oh man. So all right, so let's move on here, Connor. We got a couple more things we got to talk about tonight. What is your take on the officiating early this season? I mean, we just see these games keep racking up 50 fouls, 40 fouls. In the Northwestern Texas Tech game today, there was 45 fouls. What's your take on the officiating? How do you think it's been run so far?
It's hot and cold for me. You've got games like I went to the Pacific Stanford game. There were 50 fouls, and only one of them was intentional. and
Wow.
and Stanford was up big, so it wasn't like Pacific was just fouling intentionally the whole time. But Pacific had 4 players foul out, and you know, I was right on the court, like right off the court for a lot of those fouls, and it was, I mean, some of them were just ridiculous. I think that the officials are just getting a little bit too whistle happy early on. But then you've got other games where they're letting them play a little bit. So, you know, it really is. It's hot and cold, and I think you look at it by conference. Certain officials in certain conferences, like the officials are not as liberal in terms of calling fouls as they are in other conferences. So.
Oh, I completely agree with you. Like, I'm not naive. I know it's not every single game, but it just keeps, and we make the joke about, oh, refs get whistle happy, but it's true. You know, once a few start coming and then more and more and more. And it's some of the fouls that are so frustrating. It's the off the ball fouls. You mentioned it in your video with me and Kevin the other day, the anticipation fouls. You know, it's like they almost wait to see, oh, is this ball going to go in? And we're going to call an N1 here. You know, there's just so many. It's the touch fouls that frustrate me. You know, the fouls that are not even in the play. You know, it just gets so frustrating because it ruins the flow of the basketball game. And I just wish, you know, they'd let the players decide it and not the whistles.
Right. No, definitely. And I think my issue with it is that it's not going to be a big priority, I don't think, for you know, the NCAA, because it's not like the officiating is necessarily lopsided in any team's favor. It's just either really, really consistently aggressive foul calling, or, you know, they don't call fouls. But it's not like, I haven't seen a game yet where I think the officials decided the game. I just think I've seen games where they hindered the players from deciding it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you know, a game that should be about 2 hours to 2.5 hours to, you know, to just the length of the games just gets so out of hand. So that's frustrating as well. So, but, you know, hopefully it gets better, but, you know, obviously I'm going to cross my fingers, but I don't think it will, but hopefully we can get some sort of, you know, consistency, you know, whether it be, you know, just slow down. Like in the game tonight, just for an example, before we move on, Texas Tech's up by 35, right? And they're continuing to call fouls with 5 minutes left. Like, I wouldn't call a foul in that situation if somebody got decapitated. You know, that's the only situation in that excuse me, that's the only way I would call a foul in that situation.
yeah, I think you have to call the obvious fouls, but, you know, the ticky-tacky body-to-body contact on a block in that situation, just kind of let go. I would let body-to-body contact in most situations go, but you know, because that's what I've seen is a lot of defensive players can't alter shots because they'll go straight up, but because the offensive player goes into their body, they get called for the foul.
Right.
So you're seeing a lot of players kind of just fall off under the basket.
And what do you feel about these reviews? Do you think they take too long as well? Because it's funny, you know, I'm watching the replay and I can see what happens in a matter of seconds when you have the referees taking 10 minutes to figure something out.
Yeah, I really haven't seen a review that deserved any more than maybe 30 seconds yet this season. But you know, there's definitely reviews that are going to take that long. whether it be who the ball went off of or whether it landed like out of bounds or whatever. But yeah, definitely, it's just one of those things where I think that they're worried about getting it right when the obvious call is there, and then they don't really care about getting it right when they're blowing the whistle. So
Absolutely. It's just kind of frustrating, It's another thing that ruins the flow of the game. Like, let's get back. Let's get back on the court. Let's get going. Next thing I wanted to ask you about tonight is scheduling. We've had a lot of cupcake scheduling games. Toccoa Falls has kind of become a John Jay School of Law, just a couple of these schools that have been scheduled. I'm kind of scratching my head and saying, how is this possible? How is this going on? What do you feel about, schools playing schools like that in the regular season? Shouldn't they use their exhibition and scrimmages against those schools and then schedule better competition once the season starts? What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I think, and even if you want to schedule them during the regular season, they shouldn't count towards your win total. Granted, they also count towards your loss column. So schools like Milwaukee, who went out and played a D2 school and lost by 14 points, that's going to count against them. But I mean, how many? There's going to be 50 to 60 schools that just beat up on these D2 schools and get their stats up and get that mark in the win column with really no real challenge at all. So
exactly, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what does that do for your team to go out and beat Toccoa Falls by 100 points? West Virginia played some team called Cavalry last night, who was like a Division III Bible school. And no, I'm sorry, somebody. It wasn't West Virginia. It was somebody else. I can't remember, but they're up 50-8. The score was like 50-8. At halftime or something like that. And I'm thinking, how is this going on?
Yeah, I mean, for me, if you wanted easy wins like that, you just play the SWAC. But right. But I mean, granted, it can be good for confidence building. It can be good for working kinks out. But I agree, it's just another exhibition game that counts to a school's benefit. And that's really what I think exhibition games should be for. Exhibition games should be for learning how to work together as a team and working out those kinks. That shouldn't be what a non-conference regular season game is about.
Absolutely. And I said that on Twitter the other day. I said, call the SWAC or call the MEAC, schedule somebody who has a pulse, and who's at least Division I.
I mean, it's debatable whether the SWAC has a pulse right now, but get to that.
At least
later.
they're a Division I conference, we'll at least they're Division I conference. So, God. All right. So, a couple more things I wanted to talk about. This is just kind of some fun stuff. But did you see the Grayson Allen flop yesterday?
I did see it. I did, and
take on that.
See, I never really blame players for taking advantage of the fact that they know refs are going to call anything and everything. And so the fact that Grayson Allen threw that acting job up and got the call, props to him. I mean, he's a good player. He knows how to game the refs. If you really want to complain about anyone, blame the ref who blew the whistle when the guy's hand was 3 feet away from Grayson Allen's face. So people who are mad at Grayson Allen, yeah, okay, he took the easy way out of that one, but he knew he could, and it worked. So
I'm not so upset with that he sold it, but it was just how far he went. Holding his face, and he's looking like he's about to cry. Like, you got the foul call, okay, let's move on. Like, why do you have to sit there and bend over and hold your face and look like you're about to shed a tear? He just goes above and beyond. I mean, you already got the whistle, so just move on, buddy.
Yeah, and I mean, that might have had something. I don't want to say it's why he did it, but I mean, he could have been trying to pull the flagrant. So but yeah, no, I agree. Get the foul call and be done with it, and then go play the games.
Yeah. Right. It just doesn't help his reputation either. He has such a slim reputation as it is, and for him to do that, it's just you just shake your head and say, "Here we go again." last year, and now this year with that flop. It was just funny. You know, it was just a funny video, and I just thought it was just a little over the top. But all right, a couple more things tonight. So we got some really, really good conference tournaments coming up in the next few days. I always love this week. You know, you have during the Thanksgiving week, you have Maui and the CBE Classic and the PK80, which is a new tournament that looks really exciting. What are some of the conference tournaments you're looking most forward to, Connor?
I mean, you named 4 of the 5 that I had down. I'm going to the PK80, so I'll be at that one. That one has Duke, Michigan State, Gonzaga, Florida, Butler, Oregon, Oklahoma, North Carolina. So that one has really good teams. Hall of Fame Classic, obviously, UCLA, Baylor, Wisconsin, and Creighton. Creighton's playing a lot better than I think a lot of people expected them to. Battle for Atlantis has some pretty good teams. And then I find the Advocare Invitational pretty interesting. None of these teams are going to blow you, other than West Virginia, maybe. None of these teams are going to blow you away this season. But they all have something to like about them. St. John's is playing pretty well. Oregon State looks to be improved. Long Beach State's playing pretty well. UCF is playing pretty well. So they all have had pretty good starts to the season, and it looks to be a competitive little tournament that not a lot of people are going to hype up because the only big team in there is West Virginia, maybe Missouri.
I agree with you. I think the Advocare has a lot of intriguing teams, that we don't really know yet if they're going to be good or not, and maybe we can find out, this week. So that's definitely a tournament that I'm keeping my eye on. I actually didn't realize how interesting it was until a couple of days ago when I really looked at the bracket, and I was like, oh wow, that's a little bit better than I anticipated. The other one that I wanted to mention was the Battle for Atlantis is loaded. I mean, you have Tennessee versus Purdue. Tennessee's a team that I think is a lot better than people anticipate. That's going to be a really interesting matchup. Kentucky is a team that everybody's excited about. They match up with a Villanova team. It looks like they're top 5 good this year. Arizona, who's a national title contender, they're playing NC State, another team that I think could be a little bit better than people anticipate. And then you have Northern Iowa with an SMU, 2 other really good teams in this tournament. So that's definitely a tournament that I'm very excited about. Also, you have Maui, Marquette, VCU, Wichita State, Michigan, and LSU are in that field. So a lot of really good matchups. And the CBE Classic is definitely intriguing as well with Wisconsin, Baylor, and UCLA, Creighton. So a lot of good games this week. I think this is when you'll see, we said the first week was underwhelming. I think the second week here is going to be a lot better.
Right. And the one I want to point to as well, it's not a tournament. It's kind of a week after all the tournaments end, or 2 weeks after. But the Jimmy V Classic in New York, you've got Gonzaga against Villanova and Syracuse against UConn. So it's going to be that's another one. It's going to be kind of after all the tournaments die down, but it's another one that has 2 one really good matchup between Gonzaga and Nova, and then another one that's intriguing kind of between Cuse and UConn, that are kind of those teams that are on the edge. Like, are they going to be good and maybe sneak into the tournament, or are they going to be awful like they have been, the past year or two? So
I just wanted to make a correction from before. That Cavalry Division III Bible School, they played Western Illinois, and they lost 102-25.
Oh, so they scored 25. That's
102-25. That's a real score of a basketball game at the Division I level.
I mean, you can't be worse than the SWAC, though. The SWAC has lost every single D1 game they've played and has 1 win against a D2 school. So
before we do our last segment tonight, I wanted to ask you about Northwestern. They got absolutely pummeled by Texas Tech today. Texas Tech was really impressive. I love their athleticism. Zach Smith, Keenan Evans. They have a really deep roster as well, really experienced. Now, Creighton's 3-2, still pretty early. They played some good competition. They lost to Creighton the other night as well. Is there a little part of you that maybe thinks last year's Northwestern team was a little bit fluky and maybe they're not as good as people think? Or are you still thinking this team is pretty darn good?
I'm kind of in the middle. I think that we definitely had them a little bit too high to start the season in the top 25. I still think they're a tournament team. I still think they're probably in that top 40 to 50 range. But I do agree. I think last year's run was something that we kind of took a little bit too much into. And I think the emotions surrounding last year's run, I think we took a little bit too far into account. You know, they were playing with house money for a good portion of the season. So um, no one really expected them to make it last year, and now everyone's expecting them to do well. Looking back at that, I think that might have been a little bit of an overstep on everyone's part.
And you know they have a target on their back this year. Last year they didn't. You know, they were little old Northwestern, and you know they were scrappy and everything. And this year they're a top 25 team out of the gate. So it's different pressure. You know, it's different pressure when you know you become the hunted and you're not the hunter. So it's still early. You know, they lost to a really Texas Tech team. Creighton is a possible NCAA tournament team. So I'm with you. You know, I'm not completely, you know, going to say, oh, this team isn't as good and whatnot. You know, they have some kinks to work out. Their depth is definitely an issue. Getting Aaron Falzone back, I think, is positive. But still, I just don't know about that bench. You know, Scotty Lindsey, Vic Law, McIntosh are really, really good. But you need other guys to step up, and I'm not sure that they've had that yet. So we'll see. You know, it's still early. I still think they're a top 5 team in the Big Ten. So definitely we'll keep an eye on Northwestern. So our last segment tonight is a new segment called the Fan Derangement Syndrome segment that we're going to do every week. You know, being on Twitter, being a college basketball, you know, site on Twitter, you deal with a lot of interesting people. And some fun, you know, you get some fun debates going, and then, you know, 95% of the people you talk to are respectable and fun to talk to, and you have some great debates. And then you have your absolutely crazy fans that just can't accept reality. So tonight I got 2 people I wanted to mention, 2 stories real quick. And if you have any, you can share too, Connor. But the first one was, and I think you remember this tweet. I put out a tweet about maybe 2 weeks ago saying Gonzaga doesn't deserve to be in the top 20. And, you know, I got a little bit of flack for it, but the worst was this gentleman, a Gonzaga fan, I won't mention his name, got all on me and said I was stupid, and he called me every name in the book. So last night, right, after Gonzaga beats Utah State without their best player, Utah State's a bottom tier Mountain West team, he sends me the box score. Like I'm supposed to be impressed, or I'm supposed to be, you know, like he's proving me wrong or something. And am I crazy? I mean, am I supposed to be impressed about Gonzaga beating Utah State at home without Kobe McEwen?
I'll tell you something.
They didn't even play that well.
Obviously, I'm a Gonzaga fan. No, and they looked pretty rough in the first half. You know, and I told people Mark Few's going to make the adjustments in the second half, but I have my concerns. And that same tweet, I got, you know, in a little bit of a debate with another fan, because while I have Gonzaga right now kind of in my top, I don't think I have them top 20 right now. I have them like 21. I still have my concerns. This team still hasn't answered some of my concerns, whether it be players that they need on the floor getting into foul trouble, or certain players picking up the offense. And it's understandable to have concerns about this team. And I think that, you know, sending you a picture of the box score from a game that they should have won by over 20 points isn't something necessarily to be proud of. So
the problem is, though, when you're saying a team isn't as good as people think it is, you're not necessarily saying that they're a bad team.
Right.
I still said in that tweet that Gonzaga's NCAA tournament team. I think they are, but they're just not as good as top 20 right now. Just my personal opinion. So that was one of the better ones of this week. The last night I had another really interesting one. I tweeted out, if you're surprised that New Mexico State pummeled New Mexico, take a look at New Mexico's roster. It's not surprising to me at all. And then I got called a Grand Canyon troll, where I'm not sure where that came from. So the the response I got from that tweet from this New Mexico fan was, New Mexico beat Omaha by 30, and they played Louisville close, Omaha. So your statement is crap. GCU troll at its finest. What do you think about that response, Connor?
I mean, fans are gonna be fans, right? They're gonna want to build up. My biggest thing, like, there are 3 things about so-called fan derangement syndrome that I can't stand. Thinking every team that you beat is Kentucky. Thinking that every player that, whether they're a 2-star or a 5-star, that every player is going to be the next big thing. And then thinking that, every player that leaves your program is replaceable. And none of those things are necessarily true. As for that one, I mean, Omaha is a team that was already kind of middle of their conference in the Summit, and lost a lot of guys this season. So, and I think it's telling, like, when we were asked who we thought was going to win the New Mexico State, New Mexico game, both of us, within like a minute of being asked, responded that New Mexico State was going to win. And I don't think either of us doubted the fact that the Aggies were going to win. So, they're always going to try and build it up. Obviously, he does have a point. GCU's schedule, I mean, hasn't been tremendous compared to New Mexico State's, but
Right.
I mean, just because you think that the team that they beat is easy doesn't mean that you're a fan of the other team. It's
I just don't like it too when people start pulling out scores like, oh, well, this team beat them by 20, but they only beat them by 10. I mean, every game is different. It's the first week of the season. So, I mean, comparing scores is just a little silly. Like, in that logic, you're saying that, Duke is as good as New Mexico State because Louisville isn't, whatever. But
right.
I just thought it was funny. And he also told me to delete my account, which was pretty fun. So I was happy about that. That tells me that I'm doing my job. If somebody tells me to delete my account, probably means that I'm doing a pretty good job.
Well, it's one of those things, right, where if you truly weren't relevant, or if you truly, like, people didn't care what you had to say, they wouldn't respond, right?
Exactly. So, it's tough. I respect passion. I'm very passionate about the teams I root for, but you have to come to, your senses sometimes, and, come to relevant, actually, you lost 4 starters, or you lost, your 2, double-digit scores. Like, you're not just going to replace that. So It's just frustrating sometimes to deal with, but it's part of the job.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So,
and like,
all right, well,
I've said, like, we're willing to admit if we're wrong,
sure.
But, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily don't know what we're talking about. Just some teams it's surprise, some teams don't. You and I had different views of this Wyoming team. I was not as high on them as you were heading into the season. I'm starting to come around. You were probably right about that, but, like, yeah, I think it's just one of those things where you're gonna hit, you're gonna miss, and people need to realize that, and people need to realize that not everyone's gonna love their team as much as they do.
Right. Exactly. So, predictions are 50-50. You're either going to be right or you're going to be wrong. So sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. But, it's all in fun. I just hope people know that, this is just all for fun. It's just it's just fun. So just, like, don't take it so seriously. But all right, so that wraps up the podcast tonight. I had a really fun time. We're going to do this every Sunday. Like I said, we're going to have, a new guest on, and we'll break down what's happening in the sport every week, news, notes, scores, all that stuff. Connor, you got anything coming up on your YouTube channel?
Not really. We're gonna skip this week's midweek recap. I'm traveling Tuesday and Wednesday, from LA to the Bay Area, tomorrow, Tuesday, and then I've got like a 12-hour drive to Portland, so it's just not in it to make that. But we'll definitely be back next week, and I'm gonna have Joe Ryan on for that, the post Thanksgiving recaps. So yeah, so that's it on my end. Other than that, I'll be live tweeting the games I'm at for the PK80. So.
Yeah. Speaking of Joseph, we're going to meet down in Madison Square Garden on the 13th of January for the Villanova St. John's game. So I'm definitely excited about that. I had never been to Madison Square Garden before, so that should be a fun time.
Yeah, and I think Eli Betger and a few others are going to Portland for the PK80. So yeah, we'll meet up there. It's going to be fun. I mean, it's starting to pick up steam in college basketball. You're starting to see it the past couple of days. So it's going to be a fun season. It's going to be an interesting season.
Exactly.
But it's going to be fun.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So again, if you're not familiar, check out Connor on Twitter at CondorianFM. Also, he just mentioned his YouTube channel. A lot of good videos up there. A lot of good previews, all types of stuff. I will be back on Periscope on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So if anybody has any college hoop questions, you can join me on there. And we'll be back next Sunday for another weekly recap. So Tony Patelis here, College Hoop News Podcast. We'll see you next time.